The iPhone 14 will have the biggest camera upgrade in 7 years. Not only that, but thanks to a new schematic leak, we now know that there are a couple of more body changes than we initially expected. So let's first take a look at those new body changes. These came out through 2 schematics posted by Max Weinbach just 5 days after we made our last iPhone 14 video, where I went over the iPhone 14 Pro CAD model. Here we can see the full dimensions of both the iPhone 14 Pro as well as the iPhone 14 Pro Max. And I found 4 very unexpected changes here. Number 1, the thickness. Both the iPhone 14 Pro and the 14 Pro Max are getting slightly thicker, by 0.2 millimeters, likely because of that larger battery. 2, the height of the iPhone 14 Pro, which looks like it is getting taller by 0.76 millimeters. The Pro Max is remaining the same. 3, the width of the iPhone 14 Pro Max, which is getting narrower by 0.52 millimeters. Not a massive change, but this should make it more comfortable to use. And number 4, this is the biggest one by far, and that is the camera bump on both models, which is getting noticeably thicker, from 3.5mm to 4.17. That is a massive 19% increase. You'll see why that is once we get to the actual camera upgrades. Now, based on these dimensions, we modeled and rendered our very own concept. And since Apple has always had a new color option with every new iPhone model, we created our very own variant. We actually tried a number of different combinations before ending up on this teal that we think looks absolutely gorgeous. We took a bit of inspiration from the iMacs and gave the camera bump a darker shade, and the contrast between the 2 shades of green makes the entire iPhone look so clean. The frame is actually very similar to the shade of green or teal on the back, but since it is made out of stainless steel, it does reflect more light, which gives it this silver look with a slight hint of green. And then of course, the camera module rings match that stainless steel frame. Do let us know what you guys think of our concept here. Leave a like if you think it looks good, and definitely subscribe as we do have some more concepts coming out very soon, including a new 15-inch MacBook Air. Now, something that we didn't get to cover in our previous video was the iPhone 14 CAD model. We only covered the 14 Pro, but since then, the regular 14 has been leaked as well. Tech website MySmartPrice, which did post a number of accurate CAD models in the past, they got a hold of the regular iPhone 14, and from the looks of it, it is identical to the iPhone 13. The only visible difference being a thicker glass frame surrounding the camera bump. We modeled this on our own concept, and I do actually think that it looks pretty good, especially since the transition from the body to the camera bump is not as sharp as it used to be. Now, just to change up the design a bit, we didn't give the iPhone 14 that dual tone look that we gave the 14 Pros. Instead, we went with a single shade of color similar to the iPhone 11s. It still has a regular glass back rather than the frosted glass, although this might be a bit hard to see on our concept because of that bright lighting. Do let me know in the comments which design style do you guys prefer, the iPhone 14 or the iPhone 14 Pro. You've probably also noticed that the iPhone 14 comes with a notch, while the iPhone 14 Pro and Pro Max, they come with a pill-shaped camera cutout. Now, on our iPhone 14 Pro concept, you might have noticed that that pill cutout looked absolutely massive. So before we move on to those big camera upgrades, I want to address why this is. When we took a look at those leaked schematics by Max Weinbach, we noticed that the front camera module was especially large. But then I realized that these schematics and CAD models do not necessarily have an accurate measurement of the in-display camera cutouts, as they are simply body dimensions, which means that the size of that pill-shaped camera cutout was simply just an assumption, especially since it lacked any specific dimensions. So then we took the logical approach and we measured the iPhone 13's front camera module and we modeled everything, all the cutouts, based on that. However, everything looked far too small that way. So in the end, we took the middle approach. We based ours in between the schematics and the actual size of the iPhone 13's front camera module. And we then matched the height of the pill cutout with it for a consistent design. And this is what we ended up with. I should also mention that this is the iPhone 14 Pro and not the 14 Pro Max, on which the cutout would have looked much smaller given that it has a larger display. I mean, sure, I would love for Apple to make that cutout smaller. In fact, what I would love even more would be a full notchless and cutoutless display. but that will probably take a couple of more years. So now let's talk about those big camera upgrades and why the camera bump is thicker by 19%. And there are 4 major camera upgrades here, with the first one being the resolution. Ming-Chi Kuo claimed a while ago that Apple will finally bump the resolution of the main sensor from 12 megapixels to 48. This being the largest increase we've seen since the iPhone 6s from 2015, which bumped the resolution from 8 megapixels to 12. And in a recent tweet, he stated that this is indeed the reason why the camera bump is getting thicker. He stated that the diagonal length of the sensor inside will increase by 25% to 35%, while the height of the lenses will increase by 5 to 10%. However, based on those leaked schematics, the camera bump increase is even greater than what Ming-Chi Kuo was saying. 19% instead of 5 to 10%. This is great, as it means that Apple is not just putting any 48 megapixel sensor inside, but in fact they would be using a fairly large sensor in order to keep the pixels as large as they can be and minimize the low light downgrades. So how big will this new sensor actually be, and how would it compare against some of the competition? Well, Ming-Chi Kuo was saying a 25 to 35% increase in terms of the sensor size compared to what we have now on the iPhone 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max. 25% would actually put it in the realms of the S22 Ultra's sensor when it comes to the overall physical size. This would actually make it the largest 48 megapixel sensor in a smartphone, which not only means that this will be a new custom sensor, but also that Apple does indeed care about maintaining a good low light performance. But having a 48 megapixel sensor doesn't necessarily mean that Apple would allow us to take full 48 megapixel photos. But instead, just like all Android phones with high resolution sensors out there, it would downsize the 48 megapixel image into a 12 megapixel one that would have more detail thanks to the original photo being 48. So photos would automatically be sharper without necessarily taking up more space. And thanks to this major change, the 4x resolution increase, we also get some other upgrades too, with the second one being 8K video. This is something that's been rumored for such a long time now, and it is also something that we already have on quite a couple of other phones, from Samsung, Xiaomi, Redmi, as well as OnePlus. However, 8K video on these phones was mostly a gimmick, as it lacked the advanced image processing that 4K video had, and the frame rate on all of these phones was limited to 24 or even 15 frames per second. The only exception was the OnePlus 9 Pro, which had 30. Now, I obviously don't see Apple doing 8K 60, that would be pretty nuts, but I do believe that because of how powerful their chips are, they will be able to have the same image processing as they currently do for 4K video, meaning that 8K video might finally be usable on a phone. Now, the third big camera upgrade is improved zoom. Sadly, the zoom module is not set to be getting any changes, but that 48 megapixel main module could technically give us a 4x digital zoom, which Apple could then combine with that 3x optical zoom to give us a 4x hybrid zoom that could look as good as 4x optical. I mean, still not as good as Samsung's 10x optical, but definitely an improvement over the 3x that we have now. The fourth upgrade is potentially better low light performance for photos, thanks to pixel binning, which is something that most high-resolution Android smartphones use today. It does actually work quite well on phones such as the S22 Ultra, but only when taking photos and not when taking videos. Of course, that Apple will have larger pixels on the sensor, thanks to the sensor being 48 megapixels compared to 108. But I do hope that Apple also does some image processing magic to keep low-light video performance as good as it is currently now. But let me know, what do you guys think about all of these camera improvements, the design changes, and also our custom color? And definitely subscribe if you want to see our upcoming video on that 15-inch MacBook Air with our very own concept. I'm Daniel, it's ZONEofTECH, and I'll see you guys in the next one. ZONEofTECH, signing out. Cheers.